Hey, good morning, YouTube. This is the Shy Season 7, Episode 4, Happy Mother's Day. And it definitely was a Happy Mother's Day. So, Emmett is picking up flowers for all the mothers of his children. And you know, he got a lot. And then he was taking so long picking up them flowers that a woman, she was trying to get some flowers too. And what she told him is, she said, dang, how many you got? And then he just kept picking up flowers, kept picking them up. And I'm like, ma'am, he got a lot. And then he just gave her the flowers. And he said, Happy Mother's Day. And then she walked out. And then Darnell, he picking up flowers too. And then he said that the flowers, they too expensive. We know Darnell cheap. He got a bunch of kids, baby mamas too. That's how Emmett just gets reeled in. But he said that the flowers, they are all getting one flower each because he cheap, and he said that they too expensive. I said, Darnell. But we gotta love you, Darnell. And then Rashad, he picks an arrangement for Alicia. Then he says, what do you get a mother who has lost her son? And then the flower shop owner, he gives him some flowers, some roses, and they are red forever roses. And then he picking through his wallet. He picking through his wallet, and he said, like he was pondering or if he had any money or enough money. And he was like thinking, probably like, well, if I spend this money, then I ain't gonna have this. Then he finally just, I said, don't be cheap on Mother's Day, Rashad. Don't. So he get her the flowers. And then Nuck visit his mom's grave with a new set of flowers. And I forgot that it was like, I don't want to quote y'all the wrong season, but I do remember him mentioning that his mom has, left the earth, she's passed on. And then he visited his mom with some fresh flowers. And that shows sentiment that he visits her grave every Mother's Day. And he puts flowers on her grave every Mother's Day. And I thought, oh, he got a heart. I know he can be sweet. And then Papa drives to get flowers for his mom. And he was so sweet. And he was driving to Boys and the Men, Mama. And he was singing too. I said, okay, Papa, get it, Papa. All right. That's my song too. It's a little sad, but I just be tearing up on that song. And Jamal, now he is cooking on the grill and talks with Jacob and Darnell. And Jamal said that, did I say Jacob? Jamal talks with Emmett and Darnell, and they both pretty much was jonesing, like the fact that he he trying to wife Dominique, and they all said that they had a pass with her. And then Emmett gonna say, well, I had a short pass with her. And then Darnell said, well, I had a long pass with her, but it didn't work out, and I'm married. And he said, my hat's off to you, homeboy. Because Jamal was like, okay, her past don't matter. I'm like, okay, Jamal, come on now, Jamal. I always liked you. You so sweet and you so cute. Vic Mensa. And see, look at me knowing his name. I like him. I'm going to get all the information on him. But he's a good rapper. He bringing that Chicago flavor / Chicago swag. And then Jamal tells them that he is going to marry Dominique. And then they was looking like, you know how the married thing, it's like unheard of to them. And then he busts Emmett out and he said, well, when you going to marry Keisha? And then Emmett said, well, he ain't have nothing to say. But, well. I'm like, Emmett, get it together. And then Bakari and Professor Gardner are talking, and he congratulates him on getting through one semester of college, getting one semester of college done. And I'm like, my hat's off to you, Bakari, because college can be hard. So you have to put your mind to the books, and that's what I've been saying in my reviews. Bakari is very smart. And then the Professor Gardner, he just was saying that he wants him to make it, and he wants him to make it to be old. And he said the Chicago streets, they pretty much chew you up and spit you out. But it was a quote that he stated, and he says, you can, what did he say? Hold on. So he says that any man or anybody that is trying to escape the streets of Chicago and that's trying to do something good, they never have a good ending. And then he just assured Professor Gardner that he was going to make it and he was going to be okay. And Professor Gardner, he was just saying, well, I have a personal situation. And then he asked, well, what happened? He said, I'm going to be good. And he said, it just reminds me of the past. And then he says that he'll see him later on at the barbecue. And he was going to grade some papers. And then Alicia accepts the gift from Rashad. Alicia be so mean. She be so mean. I'm like, But she loves Shad. And then she asked him, she had to be smart with it, and she said, so let me guess, you bringing me some flowers and all that. And before saying, let me guess, you bringing me some flowers and saying thank you, when he gave her the forever roses, and he said, you're so sweet. She said, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. I just love you. And I'm like, And Pastor Charles now, let me tell you, Pastor Charles, that's what T be scared to death. And he's delivering Happy Mother's Day to people's doors. In the church, they had your addresses. And he, he greets all the women until he comes along to Miss Smith. And she answers, and she says that her husband has transitioned. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I can pray for you. She said, no, he just transitioned to another house with another woman. I said, oh, my goodness. And then he said, well, she says, but I do need some prayer. And then he said, okay. He said, what kind of prayer you need? She said, you can come in the house. I said, okay, we know what kind of prayer she need. Okay, girl, I get it. I understand. You need that itch scratch. And then why he go to Tracy's door? And then Keith answered the door saying, what you want? And then he said, well, I'm trying to pray for Tracy. And Keith says he needs prayer. So you can come on in. And he had I'm like, That's that mentality of being locked up. He said he needs prayer too. And Charles says that he is spreading prayer. Then is interrupted by Keith saying, is that all you spreading? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not all he's spreading. And then Tracy said that she especially needs prayer today. Then Keith snatches her hand and then proceeds to get the prayer started. And since you say that you here to pray, so let's get to it, Pastor. Now, mind he said Pastor. Keep that in your mind. He said, let's get to it, Pastor. And then like he was rushing him and all that stuff. And he said, God, let's get to it. And then when Charles is done, right, he was pastor. But then he said, let's go, Charles. You got to go. I said, I knew he knew him. Of course he knew him. Because, the pastor used to be in the streets. And he probably, I bet you we going to find out. I know how the Chi goes. I bet you we gonna find out that they got a connection in a later episode. Because everybody be connected in the Chi. I don't know if y'all noticed. All the way from season 1 to this season. And I'm going to tell y'all some more how season 1 is going to play a huge factor in this season. Okay? And you remember what the Professor Gardner said? That it was just somebody that he knew. And they wasn't that lucky. And I said, okay. And then it goes to Trig, Reg, and Jake. They playing the game. Then their mother comes to the door. And then Trig said, what the you doing here? And Reg then says, show some respect. Then Reg stated, Mama, I always been your favorite. Their mama says, she then says, I have no favorites. And Trig said that their mom is sick. And we know she is. You should have saw how she came to their door. It says that he out. He pretty much can't deal with it. You know, he escapes, you know, escapes, you know, sympathy and all this stuff. And he just don't want to just ever break down because he Trig. And he Trig. And then when he Victor, he can be all buddy and all that stuff, and probably because he ain't got no woman no more. It's okay though. It's okay. And then, you know, the mama said she has no favors, and then he said, well, I'm out. And then Jake convinces Victor to stay and spend the day together with their mom, and it's for a good occasion, and it's for a good reason. And then Darnell, Emmett, and Evan, they all in the kitchen and wants to know. And then Evan, that's Emmett's little brother, he just interrupts them and he said, do any of y'all know how to play spades? And then Darnell said, he got a son in the world now. He got a son in the world that don't know how to play spades and all that stuff, and pretty much he's shading him and all this and this and that. I said, And he said, Emmett, go and get the whiteboard, because we're going to have to teach him how to play spades. And since Evan entered, and then Evan said that he entered a game, you know, a little tournament, then said that he could just learn how to do it. He don't really got to teach him. He's saying his daddy don't really have to teach him. And then he said, no son of mine ain't gonna know. It ain't no son of mine that's gonna be in the world and ain't gonna know how to play spades. I'm finna teach you. Emma got that whiteboard, and then we pans over to Papa, and he gave his mom the flowers, and his mom stated that she is not doing good, and he asked his mom what's wrong, and then she said that she is in debt, and his father left her with debt, saying the church is more stress than it's bringing her more stress and grief than it's bringing her happiness and burden. Then Papa says, well, we can get Pastor Ezekiel to help. And Papa's mom says she don't trust him. And we know why, because you know Pastor Ezekiel used to be in their life. I mean, he a street pastor, shall we say. And the same with Charles. They all street up in that pulpit. And then it goes to Alicia, and she hosting her Mother's Day brunch for all the mothers that lost a son or a child. And Tracy says that she feels that we don't have to, you know, feel trapped, and we don't have to, you know, use violence, you know, to, you know, get stuff accomplished. And Alicia says that, well, we have to get revenge. And then she cut Tracy up, and she said, well, rock is a good start, but not enough. Tracy said, that is a start. And Alicia, we are not supposed to kill, we are not supposed to unalive the unalivers. And then Tracy said the unalivers have mothers too. And the Professor Gardner's wife now. Now pay attention to this part. Professor Gardner's wife tells Alicia that grief can be cured with revenge. Cannot be cured with revenge. And she owned one of them. I understand people deal with grief differently. And then, she revisits. Well, she finally revealed. And I said, y'all, this episode gonna pan all the way back to the first season. Pay close attention. And she reveals that Christian, the little boy that Cooley saw unalived on the ground, and he, took his necklace. So that was Christian. Sweet little boy. Very, very sweet little boy. Just was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And then I'm like, he witnessed a whole bunch of everything that was going on, and they had to unalive him. And then she said that was her son. And Professor Gardner's son as well. So that's why Professor Gardner said what he said to Bakari. I told y'all, the reason y'all have to pay attention, because I should have figured it out, but I didn't figure it out because I didn't know that she was the mother of Christian. And she said that she blamed herself for years, but she said she's okay. She just takes it one day at a time. And then it pans back to Darnell, and he teaching Ethan. Is it Evan or Ethan? Yeah, it's Ethan. How to play spades. That is in his DNA, to play cards and to learn how to play cards and be be good at playing cards. I'm like, Darnell, please now. And then Tiffany, get back to the Mother's Day brunch that Jada is throwing in her backyard. It's always, the woman's movement and all that stuff for, women to just let their hair down. And of course, she did throw the Mother's Day brunch. And she just was throwing, a party and all that stuff for all the mothers. And then Tiffany is, frustrated and everything, her hormones running wild. And if anybody who has had a child before, they understand that you can be snappy. However, she tells EJ to stop running and knocking stuff over. And I'm like, but Tiffany, he outside running and everybody in the backyard, they having a good time. And then the people, how they be outside. They be outside, running through the fire hydrant, like the water from the fire hydrant and all that stuff. They just was having a good time. And then his mom, his grandmother, he said, it's okay, EJ. It's okay to make mistakes. And she said, you talking about whoopings, because them hormones is whooping your tail. And she said, you talking about whoopings. And she said, oh, mommy, you wasn't no mother for me. You wasn't no mother to me. I'm like, Tiffany, please. You gonna stop being mean to EJ. And then Trig, it went back to them. And Trig said, we gonna sit here and act like everything is all good now, huh? Sweeping this under the rug. And I just added that. He's sweeping that under the rug. And then his mom said, I did the best I could. And then he said, you got all boys pretending to be men. And then, of course, Reg, he said, well, all this standing and all this pretending and all this stuff, And then Victor still standing. And then he said that we all still standing. And then Victor jumped up and he said he had to raise Jake and him because mom was too sick to do it. And then Reg said, snarkily, the life I could have had, with a smart mouth. And then, of course, Victor said, and then he told Victor to get over it. And then Victor said, he jumped up and said, don't tell me how to grieve. And then their mama said, what are you grieving? And then he said, the life that I could have had. I said, God. I said, I get it. I understand. This what I'm going to say. I understand everything that Victor is saying. I understand how that can be. And I understand you have to take time. Everybody grieves differently. While Reg probably is grieving, if he grieving or whatever, of course he is. He just not going to show it. But Victor, he was more affected because he's the oldest. And he saw way more than Jake and Reg, because he's the oldest. And he has to endure everything about their mama. So, of course, he remembers much more than them. And, of course, he's going to have a different feeling to it. And I was sympathizing with him because I said, I understand what you're saying. And then to the mama, I understand her too. I can be, be understanding on everybody's parts and see it from all points of views. Because she said that she did the best that she could. While she could have did a little bit more, I understand. With addiction, it can be, I had, some situations, and I have experienced some, not for me, but I have been around some people that have suffered with some sort of addiction. And you have to just be patient and pleasant with them and just let a person or whoever is going through know that it's going to be okay. And you have to just be there for them. Even if you can't be there for them, just in spirit, but you have to always show some type of love and support. So I could understand where his mom was saying that she did try. Okay. And then Mother's Day brunch is at, of course, Jada's house in the backyard. And all the children's mothers and Emmett are enjoying their food. Then they ran out of food. And then they said, well, we hungry still. And bring more food. And then Emmett's child's mom stated that she pulled Emmett away. And then she talked to Emmett that she's going to be leaving. And she says that it's just for, to save on expenses because it's getting a little bit too expensive in Chicago, and she's going to leave and to, be closer to her mom to, cut the expenses, which I understand. And then Emmett, I got to be on his side. I got to be on both sides. Emmett was saying that she can't just take his son and not tell him. And she said, yes, she can. And the thing is, yes, she can. Because you were not there for them like that. And you're just getting it together. And at least she told him. And he got upset and he said, you just not telling me? Because she said she leaving next month. And he said, you just not telling me? And she said, yeah. And she said, pretty much you can't tell her what to do. And then Emmett, he just was looking. And then I said, well, Emmett, you have to understand because she did tell him, she said that she has him every single day of the year. And she also told him that, he is kind of a part-time father, and he just comes in when it's, convenient for him. And I'm pretty sure a lot of women do feel like that. And I can second what she said, and I can second for my own experience. I felt like that too. And I still do, but I don't. I'm 35 now, and I have let, time pass. And then I just have a different outlook on it now. And it's just a thing of if you're going to be there, be there. If not, then Deuces. Okay? And then Alicia and Shad, they talk, and then he suggests that the mother should go to Emmett's mom's house, to brighten their mood, and so everything won't be so sad of an occasion while they are all coming together. And he said that everybody deserves to have a good time and not be so, sad. And she took his advice because, she loves Shad. I like Shad too. And then Shad brings the ladies to Jada's house, and he said, "Happy Mother's Day, everyone. I have some more guests." And then everybody looking like, and nobody. It was just like a quiet room. And then when Jamal comes, I said, Jamal is the life of the party. I just love him. He is such a sweetie. And then he brings Shad a little, he brings him a drink. And he said, "Welcome." And then he said, "Let's get this party started." Then everybody started stepping and all that stuff. And then all the brothers, Reg, Vic, and Jake, they all eat that macaroni and cheese, their mom's special macaroni and cheese. That macaroni and cheese and paprika. And you know something? I said maybe I should try it, but paprika is hot. It ain't gonna be good. I don't see. No, I ain't gonna try it. I ain't that bold. The lady, she said that's her special macaroni and cheese. But they all sit down and then they all enjoy at the table. And that's their little Mother's Day for all three of her boys. And I said, oh, so sweet. That's such a sweet story. And then Miss Bradley comes. Miss Bradley, which is Professor Gardner. So Miss Bradley Gardner. And she comes to greet Keisha. And she asks, "How is Christian doing?" Because, of course, they went to school together. And I told you, everybody ties in together. She went to school with Christian. And then she said, "Well, he's no longer with us." And then she said she had no idea. She said she's so sorry. And then Miss Bradley, she said, "Well, happy Mother's Day. Have a good one." And then Brandon's cousin, a funny time. Brandon's cousin, Keith, and Bakari, and the Professor Gardner, are playing spades. And then Bakari said that he has to leave for the night. And they didn't play spades and all that stuff. And they ain't won no games yet. And I'm like, oh, Evan, you was taught by the best. And then Bakari said that he has to leave for the night to go to his studies, supposedly. And I said supposedly because I just want to assume that Bakari did go to his studies. So if that's the case, if that's what Bakari said, then we're going to leave him to that. And then Ethan walks to the bathroom and he states that he wants to play. He said he want to play when Bakari leaves. He said he want to play, but he can't shuffle the cards. And Keith darn near scares him, after they play one game of spades. And Ethan goes to the bathroom and he darn near scare him. And he about to jump out of his skin. And he leaves out the restroom and he says, "Don't you still effing with me?" And then he said, "No, I got my paws on a beautiful woman, Tracy." Ethan got 9 books and spades. Then the professor is happy. So when Ethan go back to the card table, he tells, and he's not supposed to tell nobody. And then Ethan, he got 9 books and spades, and the professor is happy. And Nuck surprises Keisha with a card, and Tiff and Emmett, they looking. And Emmett wanted to know what was in the card. And then Keisha said, no, it's personal. You know she gonna tell him at one point in time. And Tiff gets the garbage taken out by Nug. And then he shares, conversation with Tiffany that his father unalived his mother. And that's why his mom is no longer with us. And then everyone, they stepping and enjoy. When it got back to after she took the trash out, everybody was stepping and enjoying themselves at the party and all this stuff. I said, see, this is what I like to see on the Chi. All the happiness. And then it pans to Pastor Ezekiel. And he gives Papa an advance on his dad's church. And he is in deep doo-doo. Because he says everything has a price. And I said, that's why your mama says she don't like him. She don't trust him. And moving back to the Mother's Day party. And all the mothers, they all prepared for a picture of all the mothers. And then everybody was in the picture. And then, Emmett, of course, he was rubbing Keisha's stomach. And I said, oh. And then Professor Gardner said that he thinks that he needs to go blind 8 so they can, win the game. Well, Professor Gardner didn't say that. Ethan said that he thinks that they need to go blind 8 so that they can win the game. And he wasn't sure, but he gave him a chance. And then they won the game. And then everybody was like, I ain't finna help. I done got beat by a kid. Brandon's cousin. He wasn't happy about that game. From a little boy that don't know how to shuffle the cards. He was upset at that loss. And then Keith and Tracy talk as he asks what ends up with Charles. And then Keith says that he wants to build a life with Tracy. And asks, does she want that? You know how Tracy be looking like. And I'm like, Tracy, he's not married. He just was in prison. He ain't married. He ain't nobody's. So far, we know that he not. I'm not so sure. But I want to give Keith all the props that he ain't married. He ain't married. Okay? And then, last thing that just kind of scared me, but made me a little uneasy. And I just know Tiffany, she ain't scared. Tiff and Nug, they talk, and because he drove her home. And she states that she feels Alicia got the wrong person. And she says that is what she feels in her heart. And then Nook said, why you say that? And then that's why she said that's what she feels in her heart. And then he couldn't do nothing but respect that and just roll up and just drive off. And I'm like, and then that was the end of the Chi episode 4, Mother's Day. And I'm going to go ahead and get this. Loaded up for y'all. And I want to say thank you so much, YouTube, for you watching my review of the Chi Season 7, Episode 4, Mother's Day. And have a good one. And like, comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye, YouTube.